Hi everybody, this is Naomi from Whimsical and Wicked Soaps, and today we're going to be making my Texas history inspired Come and Take It soap. New year, new me, as they say, and this year I've committed myself to trying to post more videos of my soap making process, and we're starting the year off with a Texas inspired series because, well, I'm in Texas. I recently started a booth in my local craft mall, and I'm trying to come up with soaps that I think will be a good local favorite. So this series was actually a perfect opportunity to make some soaps that I think will at least do good with my fellow Texans. I don't know about the rest of the states, but if you grew up in Texas, you had two types of history growing up. You had United States history and you had Texas history. Because Texas history is so rich, it requires its own class. And I know what you might be thinking. Didn't we come here to make soap, not get a history lesson? But the history lesson is part of understanding why I chose to do this soap design. Because this flag is flown all over Texas and slapped on bumper stickers. So it seemed like an obvious choice. And truth be told, this is a pretty plain soap pour, so we might as well go over the history of what inspired this soap. The short version of the story is, at the Battle of Gonzales, what a lot of people actually consider the shot that started the Texas Revolution, 1835, Mexican troops were sent to the town of Gonzales to reclaim a small cannon that they had previously given to the settlers for protection. But this is Texas, and we were like, no. Instead of handing it over, the settlers actually raised a homemade flag with an image of the cannon and the words, "Come and take it." Basically, a bold Texas statement that was like, I don't think so, buddy. And when the troops arrived, a brief skirmish broke out, and while it wasn't a large battle, the message was still pretty loud and clear. We held our ground, and more importantly, it kind of lit a spark in history. That moment turned growing tension into an open rebellion, and Come and Take It became a lasting symbol of defiance and Texas independence that we still see on all sorts of merchandise today. And if you know anything about Texas or you've ever met a Texan, you completely understand why this story resonates with us. Because we march to the beat of our own drum and we don't like to be told what to do. And with that, we're done with the history lesson and on to the actual soap making. As I was babbling along, I added my titanium dioxide and my kaolin clay earlier in the video. Now, some soap makers disperse their titanium dioxide ahead of time. I don't like to do that because I find that I tend to get a lot of dreaded orange spot in my soaps when I do this. So I just like to disperse it in the oils, especially if the soap is only going to be white, which is what this soap is going to be. Once the titanium dioxide is nice and mixed in, I go ahead and add my lye water. And don't worry, the chunky stuff on top is just some Tussa silk that I like to add into my lye water. And I always like to let my lye settle to room temperature, just so that the soap doesn't accelerate too quickly or heat up, and it's easier to work with overall. And if you're wondering why the design is so plain, blame the settlers for not coming up with a more bougie design in the moment. I mean, how dare they work with what they had? Once I went ahead and blended my soap to a light trace, it's time to add my fragrance in. And for this one, I wanted to stay on theme, so I found myself a gunpowder fragrance. This is from the Candlemaker store. I've actually never used it before. When I got it in, I did smell it in the bottle and it was a little sweeter than I wanted. So I actually did a 50-50 blend with Nature's Garden Crackling Firewood because it has a really smoky scent that I thought would kind of even that sweetness out. And in the end, it did have like a really nice fragrance to it that just gives kind of a smoky gunpowder scent that I think goes really well with this soap design. And you'll see that I'm just kind of stirring slowly at this point because I don't want to thicken my batter up too much, and so I don't want to use the stick blender very much more. I want this to be just one single smooth pour since this is going to be just a single color soap, and I don't want to really accidentally inject a whole bunch of air bubbles into this either. So I want the soap to be nice and pretty and smooth. And the gunpowder fragrance did have a little bit of vanilla content in it, which is known to turn soaps either beige or brown depending on the concentration. And as I was going, I was seeing that the soap was getting a little bit more off-white when I really want it to be white. So against my generally better judgment, I put some dry TD powder in there. Normally you want to pre-disperse it because it does stay pretty clumpy. And that's why I'm trying to spread it out and sprinkle it to hopefully break up those clumps. In the end product, I didn't really have any clumps, but I wouldn't generally recommend doing this. I just was kind of trying to work with what I was already into. I'm doing these in my long mold, so I'm sorry if part of this is off the camera, but I promise you're not missing much over there. I really like these molds because as a small soap maker, sometimes my 10 bar molds aren't quite enough. These do 16, but since I'm still pretty small, it gives me enough to put in my booth and enough to put on my Etsy without having like way too many soaps to go around that I just get stuck with on my shelf for months and months and months. And I just sprinkled the tops of these with a little bit of activated charcoal because in my head, oh, it kind of looks like gunpowder. And then I decided to just do like a fancy little swirl just to make it a little bit cuter because, you know, these are probably going to be a man soap and men love cute soap. And unfortunately, either I am blind as a bat and can't find the file on my computer, or I did not videotape the cutting of these soaps. But spoiler alert, they're plain white on the inside and have sprinkled charcoal on the top, which you've already seen. So we're just going to move on to the soap stamping portion of this video. I always like to spritz my soap stamp with a little bit of alcohol because that keeps the soap from like sticking in the crevices, which is especially important with designs like this that have wording on the stamp. And if you're wondering how I get my own custom soap stamp, I actually have a 3D printer. I recently upgraded and I am so in love with this thing. Now, I'm not an expert on 3D printers. Please do your own research, nor am I sponsored by them. But I really love this new printer that I got. It's especially helpful if you're a soap maker that likes to do different designs on the fly, doesn't want to wait for custom soap stamps to be made and shipped to you, or if you're like me and you also make bath bombs and you want to print different designs and not wait for those as well. And so I'm just going to link the 3D printer that I have in my bio if you want to check it out. Moving on, you'll see I just tap the stamp with a rubber mallet a couple times and just do it kind of gently. You don't want to overdo it. And once we pull that clean, you've got a nice clean soap stamp that looks similar to the symbol on the flag. And if you are 3D printing your own soap stamps, my suggestions for these, or at least what I've worked as far as thickness on the stamp, is to do a 2mm base on the stamp and then 2mm raised design. And that seems to be like the perfect thickness for it to not be too deep and not kind of squish your soap. And it was this time that I learned that I should stop doing soap stamps on my soaping table and do them in the kitchen because the table bounces everywhere, as you can see. And I had to remove the soaps from the table because they were getting violently jumped around. And then for a final touch, I just spritz some activated charcoal with a little bit of alcohol and I use a paintbrush and it acts just kind of like paint and then you just paint in the features. And that's pretty much it for this one. I'll drop a picture at the end of the video so you can see them in their final glory. For next week, I'll be continuing my Texas series with a soap that's inspired by a historical story again that is maybe true or false. It's debatable, but it also inspired a song. So check back next week if you want to see what that design's going to be. And as always, don't forget to drop a comment and let me know what you thought of this soap, and like and follow if you want to see more of my content in the future.